You fool! Warren is dead.
Welcome to HorrorBabble. I'm back today with a curious Lovecraftian story called The Dream Diary of Rupert Tillinghast. The unknown author of the story, J. Catford, says he has a number of unpublished stories concerning Mr. Tillinghast, tales belonging to a series he calls A Dreamer in Arkham. I hope you enjoy this one, folks. The Dream Diary of Rupert Tillinghast by J. Catford. March 3rd, 1925. I set these words to paper not as confession, nor even as curiosity, but as a quiet act of preservation. There are things which cannot abide the light of day, and yet must be remembered before they dissolve into waking mist. I, Rupert Tillinghast, though the name feels increasingly like an ill-fitting mask, have begun to dream in ways I do not understand. These are not the errant fancies of an unsettled mind, nor the garish pageantry of subconscious unrest. No, these visions are real, more real than this wooden desk, this ink-stained hand. They press upon me with weight and wonder, colors too vivid to belong to this earth, crimson that sings, blue that mourns, gold that pulses like a second sun behind my eyes. The change came quietly, like dusk bleeding into night. A stillness preceded it, as though time held its breath. Then came the pull, a sensation of being remembered by something distant and vast, as though a part of me long forgotten was being drawn homeward over a horizon no map dares to chart. Always, I find myself before a tall gate wrought of polished blue stone, impossibly tall, impossibly old, standing solitary in a star-crowded void. I have named it, with a reverence I cannot explain, the Cerulean Gate. There is music there, faint and mournful, bells tolling in memory, as if each note were struck in a different century. I have begun to wonder whether this world we call real is the truer dream, and whether sleep is not descent but ascent, a return. Are we visitors, brief and flickering, or are these dreams merely the cracks in the dam of forgetting? Each night, just before the veil closes, I glimpse vast landscapes of shifting light and impossible geometry, forms that tremble at the edge of knowing. And there is something else, an observer. I feel its gaze, cold, as if I were an insect beneath glass. Once, after a particularly harrowing dream, I awoke to find the mirror in my room humming faintly with a strange pressure. I turned, and for the briefest moment my reflection did not follow. It watched, then mimicked. The details fade upon waking, as they always do, but something urges me, compels me, to write. A symbol now recurs in the dream sky, a broken circle bisected by a single slanted line. It flickers behind the stars like an afterimage. Last night I crossed a bridge of dreamstone, and there, just beyond reach, stood a figure clad in tattered yellow robes. I could not see its face. It did not move, and yet I felt seen. A beggar? A priest? Or something older, wrapped in form and ritual? I dismissed it then, but the image persists. I go now willingly into sleep, though some part of me trembles at the thought. There is fear, yes, but it is the fear one feels before opening a sealed book found in the ruins of a lost city, a fear inseparable from wonder. There is a wind rising in the hollows of my mind, and it blows from a country I cannot name. Later. I write again, though I had not intended to. The act of recording this morning's impressions brought with it a strange restlessness, a need to verify, to connect. I ventured into the old quarter of Arkham this afternoon, ostensibly to clear my thoughts, though I suspect now that something within me was seeking confirmation. I found myself, almost by instinct, wandering into Charlemagne's books, that crooked little shop tucked behind the boarded post office, where the dust smells older than parchment, and the bell above the door rings with a tone too deep for its size. The proprietor, an emaciated man whose name I have never learned, watched me with his usual indifference. I made no request. I simply moved, and my hand found a worn folio bound in cracked calfskin, untitled save for a sigil etched into its spine. The symbol, a broken circle, bisected by a slanted line. My breath caught. My heart stumbled. Eagerly, I opened the book. It was a translation, or perhaps a transcription of an older work. Latin, with marginalia in Greek, and something I believed to be Aclo. The text was a fever of contradictions, mentioning thresholds that are not places, gates that exist only in dreams, yet bind waking worlds, and a field of stars wherein stands a blue monolith known only to the dead and the unborn. This monolith the text called Porta Cerulia, the Cerulean Gate. The gate is said to appear to those whose sleep runs deeper than flesh, and that to pass through it is to shed the body as a candle sheds its wax, leaving only the flame. It also suggested, albeit indirectly, the presence of guardians at the threshold, masked figures who remain silent, yet whose gaze induces forgetfulness. One marginal note, written in trembling hand, read, "None may return unchanged. Beware the one who waits across the bridge, for he is not the king, but the cloak the king wears." I left the shop empty-handed. The proprietor never asked my business. Yet I feel something followed me, an idea, a name, or the trace of one. The Cerulean Gate is real. Others have seen it. Others have passed through. I do not yet know whether this knowledge comforts or damns me. March 5th, 1925. I did not wake in the usual way. There was no disjunction between dream and daylight, only a quiet falling inward, like slipping beneath still waters. I crossed a threshold, I am certain of it, though I did not feel myself pass through. I believe I did not dream last night. I believe I arrived. I opened my eyes upon a platform of black glass suspended in nothingness, its surface echoing starlight from constellations I did not recognize. The stars shifted when unobserved, rearranging themselves like guilty thoughts. I turned, and the sky turned with me, but never in the same way twice. Time itself misbehaved in that place. Clouds flowed backwards across the heavens, returning to shapes already seen. Bells chimed before their towers appeared, and my own shadow, when it deigned to accompany me, retreated from my feet like a beast fleeing its master. I descended spiraling steps and emerged into the city proper, vast and burnished and unwholesomely symmetrical. Its towers curved inwards towards one another, like listening horns, its archways twisted in impossible loops, curling into their own reflections. Nothing cast proper shadows, yet light clung to surfaces it should have fled. The entire city was suffused in brass and blue, with the occasional pulse of deep gold, colors that vibrated against the mind rather than the eye. Above it all loomed a clockwork moon, chained to the zenith by 6 enormous filaments of living silver, each the thickness of a cathedral spire. I walked streets devoid of footfall, yet I felt observed at every turn. Reflections lingered in windows too long, and occasionally I would spot, just at the edge of sight, a figure who was not there the next moment. Eventually, the inhabitants revealed themselves. They moved with terrible grace, gliding rather than walking, draped in robes that seemed woven of fog and parchment. Their faces were masked, smooth and featureless, though I sensed their eyes beneath. Some bore ornate timepieces where their eyes should have been, watch faces whose hands spun in spirals rather than circles. I tried to speak, but my voice emerged as a reverse echo, the end preceding the beginning, words collapsing into themselves. They bowed in silence and drifted past, undisturbed. One paused long enough to hand me a folded slip of parchment, its surface warm as skin. I awoke with it still clutched in my hand, blank. At the city's heart stood a palace of mirror glass and brass, half dissolved into the sky. Its spires reached both upwards and downwards, as if piercing dreams above and below. Inside, a great chamber yawned beneath the ticking moon. There stood a throne, vast, golden, and ringed with glyphs I felt rather than saw. At first it was empty. Then, for the briefest flicker, it was not. A figure in yellow occupied it, tall, unmoving, crowned with silver thorns that wept sparks of light. Its robe stirred without breeze, and though its face was masked, or perhaps was the mask, I felt its gaze fall upon me with ancient gravity. It said nothing, but I heard judgment nonetheless. I turned to flee, but the palace did not permit it. Every corridor returned me to itself, though the walls changed hue and the portraits wept ink. In desperation, I closed my eyes and walked backwards. Only then did I break the cycle. I returned to the glass platform, now dimmed and cracked with veins of rust. Above me, the clockwork moon had begun to rot. Its gears leaked a pollen of greenish gold, and its ticking had grown uneven, like a failing heart. I woke then, but not wholly. My room felt unfamiliar. The hands of my watch were gone, and my reflection, in the instant before it mimicked me, smiled. On my nightstand lay a silver gear, humming faintly. Its edges etched with the same sigil I've now seen 3 times, a broken circle cleaved by a slanted line. The city calls to me still. I feel its echo in clocks that no longer chime, in street lamps that flicker just before I pass. Time bends. I am no longer certain whether I leave these dreams or whether they are simply sleeping within me. The throne is not empty. Not always. And the moon remembers me. Later. I have not stirred from my home today, held by a kind of lingering weight. My bones ache with the echo of foreign gravity. I find myself moving carefully, as if the angles of the room might shift if I look at them too quickly. I have spent the afternoon and early evening in the sanctuary of my library, beneath the lamplight's gentle haze. The scent of old paper, binding glue, yellowed pages, the faint trace of tobacco smoke from a previous owner has always brought me peace. Here, among my books, I feel grounded. The spines are familiar friends, the shelves sentinels of the known. I made a strong cup of coffee, 3 spoons instead of 2, a small act of rebellion against the weariness pressing behind my eyes. I sipped it slowly, as though it might anchor me to this reality. As I sat wrapped in the worn tartan throw I keep draped over my reading chair, my hand wandered, again without conscious thought, to a particular volume on the upper shelf. Chronicles of Lunar Symbolism in Pre-Dynastic Cultures. A strange inclusion, I remember, a gift from an old friend with a dry sense of humor and an interest in forgotten things. And yet, on page 143, Beneath a section describing moon rituals in the steppe ruins of vanished Yare, I found this passage, half translated from fragmentary Akkadian. And in their dreams they beheld the bound moon, chained with silver veins to the peak of the shattered tower. There it ticked in blindness, its light false, its face forgotten, and all time turned widdershins in its gaze. They call it the Mirror of Unreturning, and said that those who stood beneath its shadow left echoes in the sky. I do not know how this could be. How could I dream a place that exists in such obscure texts? Or, more troubling, have others dreamed it before? Does the dream belong to me, or do I belong to it? I ran my fingers over the silver gear again this evening. It had cooled since morning, but as I turned it in my palm, I thought I felt it twitch, as though remembering motion. The library is warm, the light steady, the coffee sharp and earthy. These are the things that tell me I am awake. And yet I catch myself listening to the ticking of the clockwork moon, so far away, and still so very loud in my mind. I may read a while longer before sleep, or perhaps I won't sleep at all. For the moment, I am safe. For the moment. March 7th, 1925. I have returned, though the word feels hollow, as if it no longer belongs to me. Last night I wandered far beyond the clockwork city, across a great bridge of mirrored stone that fractured beneath my footsteps, yet bore my weight all the same. There was no sky above me, only shifting veils of starlight, as if the heavens were reluctant to be seen. The bridge ended without warning, crumbling into dust, and I found myself descending a long dune of pale ash. I had entered a desert, but one unlike any I have ever known. Its dune shimmered with delicate spires, roses impossibly large and fashioned entirely from glass. Each petal refracted a different memory, some mine, some not. I glimpsed a birthday candle from my 5th year, my father's boots at the hearth, a stranger's wedding, a war I did not fight in. As I walked among them, the roses whispered names. They spoke the names of people I had forgotten, and perhaps was meant to forget. Some I remembered with clarity. Others stirred no recognition, but left a hollowness behind, as if a room within me had been robbed while I slept. The sky above the desert pulsed in soft rhythm, like the heartbeat of a dying star. Occasionally, fine shards of rose glass drifted down like snow, and I took care not to breathe them in. Even so, I began to feel the desert working upon me. There are memories I cannot now retrieve, like books misplaced on shelves I can no longer see. In time, I came upon a figure seated upon a throne of spun quartz. It was veiled entirely, its robes the color of milk turned thin by age. At its feet were parchments made of skin, each inscribed with glyphs that shimmered and rearranged themselves as I watched. It did not speak, but gestured to an open space before it. I knelt instinctively, and the moment I did, I felt something leave me. A name, a foreign name. I felt it go, like a tooth pulled from my spirit. The figure nodded slowly, and a faint humming filled the desert, as though every rose were singing in agreement. I climbed to my feet and stumbled onward. At the edge of the desert I found a hillock of shattered blooms. There, etched into a shard of amber glass, I read a line that sent a tremor through me. The sky was soft before it broke. I knew the words. I did not know why. I awoke this morning with a single cut across my palm. Inside the wound, I found a fleck of something transparent and sharp. A petal, perhaps. It vanished before I could be sure. When I opened my journal, the ink on the first page had shifted slightly. My name, Rupert Tillinghast, now seemed foreign. Yet I remember the roses, their breath like wind chimes. I remember the humming. Later. I have felt strangely fatigued, as though some part of me has been used. I took a long bath, attempted to read a little from Chesterton, and made a modest supper, none of which provided any comfort. The world feels askew, tilted by some degree too subtle for the body to detect, but just sharp enough to trouble the soul. And then, while seeking a distraction, I opened the drawer beneath the far bookcase, an old oak cabinet I seldom touch, except when hunting for misplaced receipts or string. Inside it, resting atop a stack of forgotten correspondence, was a photo album. It is bound in burgundy leather, worn at the corners, its brass clasp half tarnished. I do not remember owning it. I cannot recall ever having seen it, and yet I knew immediately that it was mine. I sat with it beneath the lamp, fingers trembling slightly. The first image was of a house I did not know, but whose porch creaked in my memory. The second showed a man and a young girl, neither of whom I could name, yet I recognized the pattern of the girl's ribbon, yellow, tied in a way I myself once tied. As I turned the pages, each photograph grew more familiar and more alien. There were people whose eyes I had seen in dreams, and locations that echoed paintings I had never painted. One page bore a small pressed flower, long dead, its petals the color of old blood. Beneath it, a caption in faint pencil. The sky was soft before it broke. My hand began to shake. I closed the album and placed it back where I found it. As I write this now, I feel the emptiness again, that subtle hollowing behind the heart that the desert left. I made another cup of coffee, strong. I stood before the mirror while I drank it. I watched myself for a good long time. March 9th, 1925. The dreams grow heavier now, less like visitations and more like descents, weight pressing down from above and within. Last night I ventured farther than before, drawn as if by tide or tune to a place both sacred and hollowed by absence. I came upon it through a widening silence, a hush that deepened until it became place. And there it stood, a cathedral of black saltstone and bone, impossibly tall, its spires shrouded in curtains of flickering stars. The Basilica of the Hollow Saints. Its stained glass windows shifted before my eyes, depicting scenes of unrecognizable figures offering gifts of time and blood to thrones suspended in empty air. The scent of burnt myrrh and old rust clung to every stone. Along the nave stood the saints, towering statues draped in stone-filled robes, their faces smooth and eyeless, their hands eternally cupped, as if waiting for something never given. I passed between them slowly. Then the whispers began, words spoken in reverse, meanings folded inwards. I understood none of them, yet sensed they were my own thoughts, waiting to become. One statue wept a single drop of green-gold ichor, which evaporated into rust-red mist the moment it struck the floor. Another raised a long, arm-like shape and offered me a scroll made of woven breath. I could not read the symbols. They shifted when held too long, rearranging into glyphs that echoed behind my eyes. At the far end, before the altar, lay a mirror embedded in the floor, wide as a reflecting pool, and blacker than any natural glass. It did not show me the ceiling, nor the saints behind me, but instead a scene already past. I saw myself kneeling, offering up a name. The ritual was the same I performed in the desert, though then I did not know it. Then one of the saints turned, only slightly, a tilt of the head. In that moment I felt a message impressed upon my mind, spoken without sound. We were not made for clocks or kings. The basilica pulsed, like a bell struck in the bones. All light shivered. When my eyes adjusted, I stood once more at the entrance, a brass token pressed in my palm, etched with the broken circle and slashed line, the same sigil that stalks me through these dreams. I awoke as if surfacing from deep water, gasping. My boots were coated in white dust, fine as ash, and on my pillow lay a faint handprint, as though someone had leaned over me in sleep. I rose and made for the kitchen, but paused midway. I had spoken aloud. I remember the sensation of speech, but the voice I heard was not mine. I end this entry with a phrase carved into the altar stone, glowing faintly as I turned away. Close not your eyes. Your dreams are doors. March 11th, 1925. There is a point past which language becomes insufficient. I now understand why madness is so often dismissed as mere confusion, when in truth it is often the mind brushing against something it was not meant to grasp. Last night I was pulled into a dream, softly, like a loose thread drawn through cloth. One moment, I was sitting at my desk, pen in hand, coffee cooling beside me. The next, I was elsewhere, though not in the dramatic sense. I felt displaced, echoed. The place was a hollow in the earth, the vale of unborn echoes, a valley filled with sound, rising in tendrils, wrapping round me in fragments of speech. There was no wind, and yet the air moved, stirred by murmurs that seemed to come from beneath the soil, behind the trees, and from inside my own skull. The terrain pulsed with the rhythm of thought. Sound came before event. I heard myself exhale before my chest moved. I heard my own footsteps before my feet found purchase. At first, I believed the voices were the murmuring of dreams past, but then I began to recognize words, lines I have written in this very journal, others I have not written yet, and some were not mine at all. He will come with broken time in his breath, the dream folded inwards. Now rust has teeth. That last one I heard before I thought it. I feel mad even writing that, but it is true. Then I saw him. Myself, but not myself. A paler echo, translucent like frost on glass. He stood a few feet ahead of me, listening. I could feel him draw breath through lungs that were also mine. And then he turned, his entire body as if hinged at the base of the spine. His mouth did not move, but I heard his voice. The more you dream, the more the dream remembers you. I tried to speak, but my voice came out after I meant it to. He continued, or perhaps the thought continued through him. They are not dead, the builders. They sleep still inside the machine, inside the moon. It rusts from the inside out. It needs minds to remember it, to complete the circuit. You are already the echo. And then he was gone. Beneath where he had stood, I saw a glimmering shape half buried in the dream soil, a small, partially fossilized gear, its teeth dulled and pitted. I lifted it, and etched into its brass face, nearly worn smooth, were the words, "We were not meant to stop." When I touched it, I saw a memory not mine, Rows of vast sleeping chambers, glass-coffined figures wired into silver nodes, their heads split open and glowing. I awoke this morning before I awoke. I experienced myself rising from bed, stepping onto the cold floorboards, reaching for my robe, and then I opened my eyes to find those actions unfolding. On my desk was a page from this journal, dated today, in my handwriting. It read, "I saw myself seeing. The dream folded inwards. Time is not broken. It is turning to look at me." I do not remember writing it, but I believe it. Later. I'm afraid to sleep. It is not a vague unease or the chill of some half-remembered nightmare. It is a full, present fear, cold and weighty, like a key pressed into my palm by a hand I cannot see. I have walked strange lands and heard stranger voices, but only now does it occur to me that my journey has no exit. What began as curiosity has become ritual, and now that I know the steps, I cannot help but dance. I spent the day trying not to drift. I drank coffee by the hour, paced the floor until my ankles ached, and read aloud to no one from books I barely comprehended. I opened a window to the chill night air, thinking it might sharpen my senses, ground me in the tangible, but the wind that answered smelled faintly of rust and roses. At one point, I stood with my hand hovering over my bedroom door, unable to move forwards or back, not because I did not wish to rest, but because I could feel the pull of the veil, as though it still echoed through my bones. And yet, I know I will sleep. I always do. The path has already been laid, step by step, in a language I'm only now beginning to read. Something in me moves towards it, willingly, even as I resist. The gear still sits on my desk. It no longer hums, it waits. And somewhere beyond the dreaming hills, a masked door has already opened. March 13th, 1925. The dreams are no longer dreams. They are visitations, rituals performed across a threshold I now recognize as real, even if its geography cannot be mapped. Last night I crossed into a place whose name I did not know, yet one my mind whispered as I beheld it. The house where the sky wears a mask. I entered through a breach in the air itself, as though stepping through a painted veil. I was not alone when I passed through. I felt the presence of other dreamers, or dream things flanking me in silence. They vanished the moment I emerged, leaving me standing before the house. It was vast, cyclopean, its walls folding towards one another like the petals of a flower about to close. The exterior was carved from ivory and shadow, etched with unreadable runes that shifted in and out of view depending on the angle of my gaze. The sky above it was not sky at all, but a featureless ochre expanse wrinkled like old cloth, beneath which flickered distant fires. And it wore a mask, a literal one, vast and motionless, suspended in the heavens, expressionless but watching. I could not tell if the sky moved around the mask, or if the mask moved subtly through the sky. As I entered the house, I found no doors, only thresholds, each requiring acts of recognition. I passed through 7 chambers, each stranger than the last. A library where books bled light and screamed when opened. A hall where the walls remembered every footstep and whispered them back. A room where statues wore masks that changed when I blinked. A stairwell that ascended downwards. A gallery of mirrors that reflected my future selves, each warped in subtle, terrifying ways. A chamber where time was suspended mid-thought, and the smell of forgotten incense burned without smoke. A final, doorless void into which I stepped, and arrived at the sanctum. There, seated upon a dais of petrified bone, was the high priest not to be described. I dare not pretend to remember him clearly. The mind recoils. I can say only this: he was tall, and draped in tattered robes the color of failing suns. His mask was fixed and changing, its expression alternating. Comedy, tragedy, ecstasy, ruin. I saw horns of light, a wound that wept stars, and the flickering of yellow beneath the folds. I fell to my knees, unbidden. I did not worship. I did not weep. I remembered. I remembered the clockwork moon. I remembered the builders sleeping in spires of frozen rust, their mouths sealed with wax, dreaming of recurrence and ruin. I remembered myself as one of many, echoes fracturing outwards, roles played in a play no one authored, all faces drawn from masks behind which sat the same watching thing. The high priest lifted a hand. His fingers were long, tapered into points that rang like chimes when moved. In the air before me, a sigil appeared, the broken circle and slanted line, now glowing with the hue of failing time. Then he spoke, though not aloud. A phrase entered me like smoke entering lungs, intimate and irreversible. The throne still waits, but not for gods. My mouth moved. I think I answered, but I do not know what I said. My memory ends there, in closure, like the shutting of a heavy tome whose contents have been inscribed into the blood. I awoke at midday, still clothed, kneeling at the foot of my bed. My hands were covered in soot, and on my tongue I tasted iron and ash. My mirror was shattered, but each shard still reflected my face, a fraction of me looking in different directions. There is writing on my wall. I do not recall placing it there. It reads, "The moon was whole before it spoke. I am not afraid. I am becoming." Later. I have not left my library all day, not even to eat. I have surrounded myself with books, as if their presence might shield me from the image, his image, that fills every corner of my mind. The high priest, the masked one, the one who is not to be described and yet cannot be forgotten. I have tried. I opened the codex I keep for marginalia and translation. I pulled down 3 volumes on esoteric lunar rites. I even reached for the battered penny romances I've hidden in the bottom drawer. Anything to conjure another shape in my thoughts, but his mask always returns. It doesn't stare. It simply is, fixed and fluid, shifting between tragedy and joy. A single face folded, a god-shaped wound behind yellow silk. His voice, though it never touched air, still echoes in my marrow. The throne still waits, but not for gods. And though I do not understand its meaning, I know it was meant for me. I am trembling now, a hot tremor in my spine, in my fingertips. I spilled my ink pot across a page an hour ago. I watched it bloom like blood in water, and only after the stain had spread did I realize I had been writing. I glanced down and read the words. He remembers me because I looked. I'm afraid, not of sleep, but of what follows it. I know now that this is a summoning. He has opened a path, and I must walk it. But not tonight, not yet. The books are warm against me. They smell of dust and type and old safety. I shall stay among them a little longer. But I feel the dream pulling like a tide behind my eyelids. The sky wears a mask, and soon I must wear one too. March 15th, 1925. I have lost all sense of what separates day from night. It is not insomnia nor madness. It is something else, a thinning. Waking and sleeping are now rooms in the same corridor, and I can no longer say with confidence which one I inhabit at any given moment. This morning, I believe it was morning, I stood before my bathroom mirror and found 3 reflections, each facing slightly different directions. When I turned to leave, only one followed. Time, too, has grown sick. Clocks stop when I enter the room, then resume with a shudder once I look away. A cuckoo clock I've never owned now hangs above the kitchen arch. It struck 13. I found the silver gear on my pillow, humming as if it had something to say. When I picked it up, it whispered. I knew then it was time. My hands moved without command. I returned to my journal and, without thought or pause, I wrote 8 lines. We were not made for clocks or kings. We dreamed in spirals, not in lines. The sky was soft before it broke. The moon was whole before it spoke. Now rust has teeth, and time has claws. The throne still waits, but not for gods. Close not your eyes, your dreams are doors, and we are echoes lost in wars. The Builder's Chorus. As the final word left my pen, the gear pulsed, a radiant pulse that illuminated something behind my eyes. I closed them. I saw the interior of the clockwork moon. I was within it. There was no journey, no passage, only sudden presence. The interior was vast beyond reason, a cathedral of brass and bone, strung with arteries of starlight, humming with memory. Gears turned slowly, organically, as if the moon was alive and dreaming. I walked upon a bridge of braided filament, suspended over an abyss filled with repeating moments, stuttering fragments of lives not my own. Time bled upwards here, pooling in inverted fountains. Along the walls, I saw the builders, entombed in crystalline cells, neither dead nor living, but dreaming in perfect stillness. Their bodies were long, silver-veined, faceless. Their heads were cradled in silver masks fused to cables of thought light. I understood then. They had become the machine, or rather, they had built the machine from themselves. It is their prayer. One builder opened its eyes. I felt seen, as all I had been and would be, dreamer, witness, echo, vessel. I walked on, deeper into the mechanism. I reached a central chamber, a sphere within the sphere, where silence reigned and gravity did not intrude. There, resting upon a dais of forgotten time, was the throne. It was empty, but beside it lay the mask. It was simple, white, smooth, a blank expression shaped for no face in particular. I knew, as one knows breath or heartbeat, that it had been left for me. I knelt. My hands did not shake. There was no ritual, no fanfare, only a choice that was never truly mine, though it felt gentle in its inevitability. I placed the mask upon my face. There was no vision. There was only clarity. The dreamlands unfolded. I saw Althar and Leng, and the desert beneath Carcosa. I saw Carter kneel before gods who had already departed. I saw the high priest lower his mask and find only light within. I saw the builders die and live again, and wait. I saw the moon burst from a thought so loud it fractured stars. And then I saw myself in infinite variation, orbiting this moment from all directions. Each version of Rupert stepped through the cerulean gate, each with different words, but always the same end. I spoke the chorus aloud. Every word turned like a key in a door that was also a memory, a name, a light. The final line echoed backwards, and we are echoes lost in wars. I awoke, or believe I did. I am seated in my library. The gear no longer hums. A mirror hangs where no mirror has ever been. In its surface I see myself, wearing the mask. The journal lies open before me. I write these words, but they change even as I inscribe them. The ink turns to symbols, to glyphs, to a language I now remember having forgotten. I no longer recall if I was ever born. I no longer care. There is one last thing to write. It arrives as a whisper from behind the ceiling of the world. You who read this, close not your eyes. Your dreams are doors, and I am already inside. The signature is missing. In its place is a symbol, a broken circle, bisected by a single slanted line. Postscript. Document reference MS 191377B. Repository, Miskatonic University, Arkham. Department of Occult Manuscripts and Oniric Phenomena. The journal here transcribed was discovered in a decaying trunk unearthed during renovations to the cellar of Charlemagne's Books, a long-defunct establishment formerly located off Garrison Street, Arkham. No census records list a Rupert Tillinghast as resident in Essex County during the period the journal spans, 1925, though the name appears in a single partial course enrollment from Miskatonic University's Metaphysical Studies program in 1917. The file is blank beyond his name. The manuscript itself is bound in plain leather, warped by age, and appears to have undergone some unusual chemical process. Several pages are inscribed in a substance not identified by testing, faintly luminescent in low light. Marginalia includes glyphs bearing resemblance to Aklo, narcotic, and one unidentified script. Curiously, the final pages are not in English and appear to resist translation, displaying different markings under varying conditions of light, temperature, and observer. A small brass gear was found pressed between the final two leaves, engraved with a symbol, a broken circle bisected diagonally. Since acquisition, at least 2 archival interns have reported auditory phenomena when handling the text, describing chimes, inverted bells, and the ticking of something far away. One reported recurring dreams of a moon suspended in chains, visible only through mirrors. The manuscript remains under restricted access. For safety, all reading is now conducted under observation and limited to 20-minute intervals. Further review pending. Dr. Henry E. Lawton, Miskatonic University Archives. If you enjoyed listening today, be sure to subscribe to the channel by hitting the red subscribe button below. After doing so, click the bell icon next to the subscribe button to receive new content notifications. If you'd like to support our work and receive exclusive perks, consider becoming a channel member by clicking the join button below. To support us in other ways, see the video description for links to our Bandcamp and Patreon pages, our merch store over at Teespring, and further information relating to our releases on Audible, iTunes, and Spotify. And until next time,